I think Nikon has finally done it. They've figured out how to read minds, because with the Nikon ZR, they have made a near perfect creator camera for me. Now, as for what this video is meant to be, it's not going to be a full review of the ZR. I'm not doing test charts and measurements and things like that. Instead, I bought the camera on release in Tokyo and brought it to Hokkaido and then made content with it for a few weeks to actually figure out how it performs in the real world.
Welcome to Hokkaido. In Hokkaido, you can experience the beauty of nature every season. Please enjoy our hot springs and seasonal food. We wish you a very pleasant trip here in Hokkaido.
Beware of bears. Brown bears are currently in sight. Please be on alert. That looks like a fresh enough sign. So why did I go out and buy this camera on release? Because that's something I never really do. And the reason for that is back in late 2022, I actually bought the Nikon Z30 as a travel video camera. It's a small, compact body with great quality 4K recording and a flippy screen, making it ideal for solo filming. The small size and lightweight of the Z30 allowed it to be mounted just kind of anywhere easily. You could put it on fences, poles, clamps, mini tripods for all kinds of shots when traveling and vlogging. But more importantly for me, the Z30 had one incredibly important feature, and that is good internal microphones, which allowed you to record good ambient sound, provided you had the little small rig wind muff on the top of the camera. Otherwise the wind noise was just horrendous. But that allowed you to get good audio without needing an external microphone. And there is, in my opinion, nothing more annoying than having a mic mounted on top of a camera when you're traveling. You're either taking it on and off the camera the whole time, which is really frustrating, or it's there blocking the way and it's getting caught coming in and out of your bag the whole time. So having good ambient audio built into the camera for me is super important for travel video. Now with the Z30, I actually brought that camera all over the world on multiple trips.
Oh my God!
And I've used it as my main A cam here for over a year with the Sigma 18-35 lens mounted on the F to Z adapter. And it was a great camera for this, but it had some seriously obvious limits. The APS-C sensor format was kind of annoying to deal with because you couldn't share lenses between a full frame camera and an APS-C camera too easily. You always ended up needing special APS-C lenses in order to get the focal length correct for what you're shooting. And then there's a lack of in-body stabilization, which made shooting handheld shots while traveling really frustrating. Even though the lenses had VR, it just wasn't quite enough. And then on the video spec side, it didn't have any 10-bit log shooting, which is very handy when you're traveling because lighting can be all over the place, and having that extra dynamic range in your raw footage is very useful when editing. Oftentimes, if you're shooting 8-bit non-log footage, you have to choose whether to keep your shadows or highlights, and it can make the footage look kind of cheap and video-like rather than more cinematic. But even with all these limitations, I really love that Z30. However, I did have a dream camera in my mind, which was a full frame Z30 with IBIS, 10-bit log, and retaining those lovely microphones for that ambient sound on a small body. And Nikon basically delivered everything I could have wanted in the ZR and so much more. Also, it just so happened that I would actually be in Tokyo 2 days after this camera was released. So there's only one thing to do.
So here's the Odakyu department store, Shinjuku, with big cameras. I'm going to go and buy myself a ZR. They look really good. That blue and silver looks fucking awesome. These are the Surrey City Points. That look really nice looking. There you go. Kanpai.
With the ZR being a small full frame camera, which is video focused, I'm going to be focusing on that aspect of it for looking at the image it produces. Now internally this camera is basically a Z6 III with the same partially stacked 24 megapixel sensor, capable of recording 6K video, 10-bit N-Log in body. It can also do Nikon RAW, ProRes and ProRes RAW. But if you take a look at the ZR really closely, there's a sneaky bit of branding hidden on the back, you know, blink and you'd miss it type stuff, that happens to say RED. And that is because this is the first camera Nikon has made to incorporate RED tech from their acquisition. And that means that this camera also has the new OR3D NE codec with RED wide gamut RGB and log 3G10, which is a huge deal for this camera. Now the reason this is huge for video is because there are basically 4 dimensions to producing a great video image. The first 2 are the X and Y axis, the resolution. 4K, 6K, 8K, you know, bigger number better, any techie redditor can understand this stuff. But I think the real difference in creating a very pleasing video image is how a camera handles luma, aka how it transitions from light to dark, making the gamma curve massively more important than resolution in my eyes. The N-Log curve is okay to work with, but it can be a little bit rough at times. It's not a great gamma curve and it's had some serious issues. On the other hand, RED's log 3G10 is just a much nicer curve, and I think it creates a much more aesthetically pleasing image. It looks a lot more like film, particularly when combined with RED's color science. There's a reason why cameras like the Arri Alexas of the world shoot at lower resolutions but have exquisite handling of luma. Now, if you want to get the absolute best image out of ZR, like the Z9, Z8 and Z6 III, the best format to squeeze all that quality out of that sensor and system is to shoot the 12-bit RAW formats. But you do need to put a little bit of extra work in post in order to get all of that quality out of the image. You have to use a little bit of noise reduction if necessary, and clean things up and sharpen it up a little bit, and you can get some really good stuff out of this camera. Now the internal H.265 compressed format is solid and makes a nice image if you're careful with your exposure. The way I found to get a best image out of it is to basically expose as high as you can without clipping using the waveform, and then I'll bring that exposure down in post before color grading, and I find that produces a much cleaner image. If you expose it according to Nikon's guidelines, you end up with a really dark image. And then if you apply Nikon's LUTs, it tends to be a bit weird and very noisy in the shadows. But if you overexpose it without clipping, you can bring it down. It cleans up the image quite a lot and produces a much better result in my eyes. Now I actually shoot this H.265 10-bit mode with N-Log as my main format. I'm actually using it right now to save space. I find the bitrate is very good for 25p and editing it is actually fine on my machine. If I'm shooting any high frame rate stuff, I tend to use the RAW formats instead of H.265 because they have much higher bit rates, and I think it gives a better slow motion result. and any clips I take in slow motion are generally very short, so shooting RAW doesn't consume huge amounts of space. When it comes to the internal ProRes or ProRes RAW, I've only barely played with these formats and I never ever used them. And that's because they're both capped at 30 FPS in camera, and the bit rates are, quite frankly, insane. ProRes, not the RAW format by the way, in 6K 30 will fill a 660 gig card on this camera in 43 minutes. ProRes RAW, on the other hand, will fill it in 17 minutes. But if you're shooting NRAW in normal quality on this camera, which I've always shot in, I've never found any issues with and never needed to shoot the high quality version, this can shoot for 45 minutes before filling that card. So why not just shoot the NRAW and get the best of both worlds and get more footage in the same amount of space? Now when it comes to resolutions I shoot, I only shoot this in 6K or the Z8 in 8K, unless I'm doing like high frame rate stuff where I have to drop down to 4K. But in general, I tend to shoot the highest resolution in video the camera can do. And the reason for this is that it gives me a lot more flexibility in post, which I find very convenient. So a lot of times when you're traveling, you actually can't set up a camera in perfect position. You're often limited by like fences and where you can actually mount the camera. If you're allowed to set up tripods, maybe you have to put the camera on a magnet mount or clamp it onto a railing somewhere in order to film yourself. And having that extra resolution allows you to punch in a little bit with a wider lens and then reframe the shot as needed. Rather than having to try and get the frame perfect on site, it gives you that bit of flexibility in post to kind of correct things after the fact. But even with the excellent image that this camera can produce, I still don't call the ZR a cine camera, as it's missing some cine features, mostly related to workflow, but I think it strikes a near perfect balance for a creator camera due to its small size and those excellent video codecs, and also the gorgeous 4-inch flip screen. Speaking of this screen, on the ZR we have a new 4-inch touchscreen, and right off the bat I want this screen on every Nikon camera going forward. And with this screen existing, combined with the internal RAW and ProRes recording, has basically made the idea of using an on-camera monitor just obsolete for small creators like me overnight. Now obviously there are reasons for using monitors, on more professional sets for advanced exposure tools and things like wireless video transmission and being able to see over teleprompters and that kind of thing. But for me, I just don't need a monitor with this camera anymore, and I've been looking to get rid of mine because it's been annoying to deal with. So in fact, the B-roll you're looking at of this Atmos monitor doesn't exist anymore because I've already sold it. Now the only issue I can find with this screen is that it's a flip out screen only. I would love to see one of those combo tilt and flip mounts for the screen, so that when you're behind the camera you don't have to flip it out to tilt it, but when you want to flip it out you can. And if you're looking for an example of what I mean by this, take a look at the Sony a7R5, which has, I think, the ideal screen mount for any camera. So one of the things I loved on the Z30 was the great inbuilt microphones for ambient sound, and they've reappeared on the ZR. But this time they've been upgraded with the addition of 32-bit float audio. Now if you don't know what 32-bit float audio is, here's a quick primer. Normally cameras record audio using the 24-bit format, which has a dynamic range of about 144 decibels. So you need to set the levels accurately or reasonably accurately to prevent clipping your audio, which is a real issue, particularly if you're doing things like traveling, because something really loud can happen, you know, like a bullet train blasting past at 320 kilometers an hour. But if you have 32-bit float recording on the other hand, this dynamic range goes all the way up to like 1500 decibels, and it also uses floating point numbers instead of integers for its encoding. And effectively this means you have no clipping. Its effective encoding range is far wider than any signal a microphone could ever hope to produce. So no matter what happens in terms of audio, you can always just bring down a clip signal and boost a quiet one as much as you like. You know, it's kind of like shooting RAW for audio, and if you have the option to shoot 32-bit float, do it. It'll save yourself a lot of headaches. And I've actually been using 32-bit float for a while now on the Deity PR2, and I love working with this audio format. In fact, I loved it so much, I was at one point looking at getting a Zoom F3, I think, where it has 32-bit float recording and then timecode support and wiring that to the camera, mounting it, and it was just going to be a lot of hassle to get this audio convenience. But now I don't have to do any of that, because on the ZR it can do 32-bit float audio on the 3.5mm input and the internal mics, which is a first for a camera as far as I'm aware. So not only do I get that lovely high quality audio from these great internal mics, but now it won't clip no matter what I'm doing. So that means when I'm traveling, I don't have to worry about audio levels. I just take the camera out, get my exposure right, hit record, and shoot. It's one less thing to worry about. Now the only issue with these mics is that they are hideously sensitive to wind, so you are going to need this little dead cat cover from Small Rig, which just pops into hot shoe. And with that, the wind noise problem is mostly fixed. Now there is an option in the audio menu of this to turn on wind noise reduction internally, but do not turn that on. It's absolutely heinous and will destroy your sound. Just get the dead cat cover. Also on the ZR, Nikon has finally introduced their own multi-interface shoe like other brands have, and they even have a matching shotgun mic called the MED10 that I don't actually have for this ZR, but I might end up getting in the future. Also, apparently, I read this somewhere online, but I haven't been able to find the source again anywhere. There's a rumor of a 4-channel XLR adapter coming at some point. Also, maybe in the future, brands like DJI will be able to make an adapter for their wireless microphone receivers so that the transmitted digitized audio can be sent directly to the camera. There's an adapter already for Sony cameras which removes the need for the cable and makes things much cleaner. Also, I hope that in the future that there's some way to have the MI shoe to input timecode directly into the camera using like a Deity TC1 system that I have. You know, that would be super useful in the future. Now when it comes to the camera size, I actually think that this is perfect for me. It's basically a small block, and when you put a small lens on it like the 26mm 2.8, I can then easily pop the camera in and out of a small pocket on my bag with an ND filter attached, ready at any moment to be pulled out, screen out, and I'm able to shoot a video clip as needed when traveling. Also, I found that this sort of small size and shape and the lack of the EVF hub makes it a lot stealthier with shooting, because a more traditional camera shape people will spot easier and stare at you, while with this they generally don't. Now I know a lot of people have complained about the lack of an EVF, because a lot of times when you're filming you do actually want to have an EVF. But if I'm in those situations, I'm not going to use the ZR, I'm going to use the Z8 and film with that instead. So it's just not an issue in situations where I'd use that, like wildlife. And requiring the EVF kind of misses why I bought this camera, because as I've said, it's a creator camera, it's a travel camera for video. So if anything, if I'm out shooting wildlife, this is going to be on a separate tripod filming me while I'm filming the wildlife, not filming the wildlife directly, if that makes sense. Also, the body is super lightweight for a full frame camera of this caliber, making it very easy to mount and use while traveling. And also, Nikon had the foresight, thank God, to put really good, molded into the body strap lugs on this camera, which is great. And that is because on all of Nikon's hybrid cameras, they use that incredibly stupid, fiddly triangle design, and it is infuriating to deal with those things. And not only do those little jangly things get caught on things and they block the fucking car door from opening on the Z8, which is really frustrating. It's actually the reason I took the damn thing off the Z8 altogether. But also the little like tab that sticks out gets caught on my bag all the time when I'm putting them in and out. Having the strap lugs molded into the body like this is fantastic. Nikon, please, for the love of God, do this on every single camera going forward. It's just such a better option. Just get rid of those stupid triangles, put these on, and leave it like that. I know people will probably complain. Don't care about them. They are wrong. Do it this way in the future. Now, the body of the ZR is not all sunshine and roses. There are some really weird decisions they've done, and I suspect one of them was made in order to make the camera this small, but they've put the card slots in the battery compartment, and this makes it a pain to take out the card for reading or copying files off of when it's mounted on a tripod. You have to make sure that the tripod mount is not blocking the door, so you can open the door and get the card out easily, rather than having just the door on the side that you can pop open and pop the card out, like on the Z8 and the Z6 III. Instead, they're in here. But this is also like triply annoying for me, because 2 weeks after getting the camera, I managed to drop the ZR, and it caused the battery retention clip to snap off. So now whenever I open the door to take out the card, the battery just falls out, which is super irritating. As for the cards themselves, the ZR takes one CF Express Type B and one, for some reason, and I have not been able to fathom as to why, but it takes a micro SD card of all things. Now, I have no idea why this is, because you can't do redundant recording like this, so maybe it's just a place to store like the preview LUTs that the camera now supports. But even that doesn't really make any sense. Like, why would you put a micro SD card alongside CF Express in like a video body? Like, it's just baffling. Like, I can't come up with a reason for that. Like, maybe you could like tell it to put the photos on a micro SD card and put the video on the CF Express card. But what's the point in doing that when you could just put everything on the bigger CF Express card, which is a lot faster and easier to deal with, and is not one of those fiddly little micro SD card buggers that tend to get lost really easy. You know, it's just a really weird decision. Like, I do not understand. Like, I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall of the meeting at Nikon that decided on this card setup. Like, I just don't get it. It's just weird. For all intents and purposes, the Nikon ZR has one card slot, a CF Express Type B. Now, when it comes to the battery the camera uses, it's the standard ENEL15, which is your usual standard Nikon full frame battery. They've been using this for years and years now. I have piles of these things already. You can get them super easily and super cheap. There's also lots of options for charging them. I have this thing called the Tri-Charge, which holds 3 batteries and a few cards. It's very useful. I always bring it traveling. And if I'm heading out for a long day, I'll bring it with me to have a few spare batteries. As for the battery life itself, I've actually found the ZRs to be quite good, or at least no worse than the Z8. You know, I get about the same amount of filming on both, and I've never really had an issue where I've had a battery like this die on me in the middle of a situation. But if that is an issue for you, the camera can be powered by USB-C as well, using power delivery. So you could hook up like, you know, a massive V-mount battery to this, plug in a USB-C port, or if you're feeling particularly zany, you could use a dummy battery, and that will allow you to basically run the camera indefinitely. The camera has like weird recording limits. I believe it can go for about 2 hours before it'll just stop recording for some reason. Now, I never had an issue with this, or I haven't ran into that problem at all. I generally don't do takes that long, but if you're doing like long interviews, maybe that could be an issue you might have to deal with and consider in the future. You might have to restart the recording on the camera manually. And honestly, at this point, I don't know why Nikon has these weird arbitrary record limits on some of their cameras. They should just do away with them altogether and allow you to record as long as possible. Also, on a camera this small, there's a potential for overheating, but I haven't had a single instance of overheating. I haven't even gotten the warning in any kind of use case. Although I will admit, I was in Hokkaido where there was snow on the ground and it was like -5 degrees a bunch of the time. So not exactly ideal conditions for testing overheating. You know, maybe I'll bring it to a tropical situation at some point and it'll overheat, but I haven't had any overheating issues with this at any point in any kind of like air conditioned room or shooting outdoors anywhere. But I've also never stressed it, so. But overall, the size and shape of the camera is ideal for what I want, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it a proper cine body because I think it is missing a few features. Namely, it doesn't have any kind of proper timecode in support through a physical connection. I know it supports that like Bluetooth thing, but that requires like, there's like an air glue Bluetooth you need. I think it's called the Ultrasync Blue, and that can't receive timecode, so you have to buy the Ultrasync 1, and that's like another 500 quid worth of expenses just to get Bluetooth or just to get timecode into this camera, which is, honestly, I'll probably end up buying it, but currently the only option of timecode input is through the mic port, which is kind of annoying. It would be really cool if they added like a second 3.5mm jack on this camera, so you could input timecode directly into that and have it sync that way. Or if they even just added an option to jam sync the timecode once through the mic port, so you could plug it in, jam sync, unplug it, and you know, it'll drift over time after that, like, you know, what Pocket 3 does when you jam sync, but it'll be close enough for the use case I have. Currently I'm setting the timecode manually in the menu and just timing it really well, so it's always within, you know, 1 or 2 seconds, which is enough for organizing footage, but not enough for synchronizing audio. Now, other things they could do is add a few quarter 20 threads, maybe 2 on the top for handling large audio accessories like the rumored 4-channel XLR audio recorder that I read about but still don't know if it exists. Maybe 1 on the side here for putting grips on the camera. I know SmallRig makes a grip, but you know, future things that Nikon could do to make this a more cine body. But the single biggest sin Nikon has committed when it comes to calling this a cine body is the lack of a full-size HDMI port. This thing has micro HDMI for some ungodly reason. I'm sorry, but no. That micro HDMI bullshit needs to be cast back into the fires of Mount Doom from whence it came. Now for me, I don't use the HDMI port, so it's not an issue, but if you were rigging this up with monitors and stuff, that's going to be a real problem real quick. But apart from those issues, I actually find that the size of the ZR is really nice for me. It's small and light enough to be kind of mounted anywhere I want when I'm filming myself out and about. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if these started popping up on TV productions very soon, because it'd be very handy for mounting inside of cars and for doing shoots in small spaces. Now, one thing that I've really liked seeing in this camera is the fact that custom modes allow for different exposure modes in photo and video, which is great. So I use the M mode when in video, and then when I switch it over to stills, the camera automatically switches over to aperture priority mode in the same custom setting. And this is an absolute requirement for any hybrid camera ever. If your hybrid can't switch between photo and video while simultaneously changing the exposure priority mode, it's worthless to me. Now the Z8 can actually do this in the shooting bank, so you can have it on shooting bank A, and then you can have M for video and then aperture priority for photo mode and switch back and forward, and it makes it really, really easy. But on something like the Z6 III, which uses a dial, that doesn't work. I'm sorry, but it's the wrong way to go. I actually think that mode dials should be eliminated from cameras entirely, and you should just have like shooting banks equivalent and just go with that and just have buttons to change your shooting bank and a little screen. Get rid of the whole dial on the top of the camera, your PASM dial. It's not needed anymore. Allow you to separate photo and video for your hybrid shooting, and it works so much better. Now, of course, the ZR also uses the Z mount, which means you can use any of Nikon's Z lenses, but it also means you can use any of their F mount lenses, in particular the G series, which are dirt cheap right now, so you can get some great deals on those if you're willing to put up with the use of an adapter. But a lot of manufacturers are also making some really, really nice small Z lenses that are ideal for travel and video. I actually have the Viltrox 28mm f2.8, which is a really great lens for this. The Nikon 26mm is also a great choice for a very small, compact pancake lens for video work, although the focus motor can be a little bit noisy at times, but I haven't had an issue with it at all. And then I believe there's also a new Viltrox 14mm f4 lens coming out, which I might get as well, so I have a small super wide angle lens for this camera. Also, the Z mount is insanely adaptable to loads of other lens mounts, so you can use things like PL lenses, EF lenses, and even Sony E mount lenses can be adapted to this using different adapters. So that means if you already have Sony E mount lenses and you want to buy the ZR as like a little video camera, you can use it with your existing lenses, which is very handy. But I don't have that issue though, because all my lenses are Nikon anyway. So in the end, after testing this for over a month now, was grabbing this on release an error? Fuck no. This camera is exactly what I wanted. It's a full frame, compact, video focused camera with good audio, which is just everything I wanted in my video camera for travel. And in fact, since I've got back, I've sold a bunch of gear because the ZR basically replaced a lot. So if you are looking for a high-end creator camera that will do everything you want it to, I think this might be the best choice on the market right now. And to be honest, that price tag ain't half bad either for what you're getting. But that's it for this video. See you next time.